Registration exception. This article outlines the circumstances under which a taxable person can request an exemption from VAT registration in the UAE. It also sets out the taxable person's obligations if their business conditions change after being accepted from registration. Finally, it highlights the powers of the Federal Tax Authority, FTA, to recover unpaid tax and impose administrative penalties if the exception was improperly granted. 1. Right to request an exception from tax registration. Any taxable person, meaning a person whose business activities meet the conditions for mandatory VAT registration, has the right to apply to the Federal Tax Authority, FTA, to be accepted from VAT registration. This right applies whether or not the person is already registered for VAT at the time of the request. The key condition for this registration exception is that the person's supplies must exclusively consist of zero-rated supplies. Zero-rated supplies are those which are subject to VAT at a rate of 0%, as specified in the UAEVAT law and its executive regulations. Examples of such supplies may include certain exports of goods and services, international transportation, supplies of certain healthcare or education services. If the FTA approves the request, the taxable person will be exempted from the obligation to register for VAT, effectively relieving them from the need to file VAT returns, collect VAT from customers, maintain VAT records and accounts. This exception process provides administrative relief for businesses that exclusively deal in zero-rated supplies, since they do not collect VAT from customers. 2. Ongoing obligation to notify the authority of changes. Once a taxable person has been granted a registration exception, they are not automatically exempted forever. If the nature of the taxable person's business changes in such a way that their supplies are no longer exclusively zero-rated, they must inform the FTA without delay. This notification must happen within the specific time limits set out in the executive regulation. This ensures that the authority is made aware promptly when the person starts making standard-rated supplies, subject to the standard 5% VAT rate. The person's zero-rated activities shrink, and a portion of their supplies falls under standard or exempt supplies. The taxable person must follow the exact procedures defined in the executive regulation to make this notification, including submitting all required supporting documents. 3. Authorities' right to investigate and reassess eligibility. The FTA reserves the right to conduct reviews and assessments at any time to confirm whether the registration exception was correctly granted. If the FTA determines that the taxable person was not actually eligible for the exception when it was granted, or if the person failed to notify the authority of relevant changes, the FTA has the legal power to collect any unpaid VAT that should have been reported and paid during the period when the exception was wrongly applied, impose administrative penalties for failure to register, failure to report taxable supplies, and failure to comply with VAT obligations. This enforcement power ensures that no business can improperly benefit from a registration exception while simultaneously making taxable supplies that should have been reported and taxed. 4. Importance of proper monitoring and compliance. Businesses that are granted a registration exception must establish robust internal monitoring procedures to ensure they remain eligible for the exception. This means maintaining accurate records of all supplies, and regularly reviewing the classification of those supplies, zero-rated, standard-rated, exempt, etc. A failure to monitor changes in supply classification could trigger penalties, particularly if the business continues operating under a registration exception while unknowingly making taxable supplies. Regular compliance checks and timely communication with the FTA are essential to protect the business from unnecessary fines and tax assessments. For more details, contact us.